Wonderful. All right, before I get into the meat of the presentation, a quick word on my background. I've been 11 years in medical devices, quality and regulatory, across hardware, implantable sterile devices, but also AI/ML, software as a medical device recently. And currently, my role is as a consultant, helping software device clients navigate regulatory requirements for these types of devices. And a quick word on the firm I represent. So at Wega, we are building the bridge between business and IT, and business could be quality regulatory, and IT could be software engineering teams, and really building the bridge between these two domains who don't always speak the same language or not always on the same page. Vega's got competencies in lab and research, clinical development, informatics, and computer system validation and QA. On the medical device side, we've got expertise across a wide range of areas within medical device software compliance, IEC 62304 risk management, cybersecurity. So if there are any folks here on this webinar interested in talking about any of these questions, feel free to reach me after this. So quick overview of what we're going to cover in the next little while. An AI/ML submission, what are some key components of that? And then I will dive deeper into 4 areas that I think are super important in making sure an AI/ML submission goes through smoothly. And then I'll end with some takeaways. So for an SAMD and specifically focusing on AI/ML here, we've got software documentation. So you've got your IEC 62304 activities and records to prove that you developed the device per the lifecycle process defined there. Cybersecurity, Pulse has given us an excellent overview on the FDA side of things, more on the review side, how currently FDA reviews cybersecurity documentation, but you need solid security documentation to be able to have a successful submission for a software as a medical device, and then clinical evaluation, and of course, for an AI/ML device, aspects relating to generalizability, reference dataset, transparency, data management, all of that. So today I'll just be focusing on this fourth area of AI/ML compliance from an FDA perspective. So there are some key guidance documents in this space from the FDA. A big one here that came early this year, it's a 60+ page document on lifecycle controls for AI/ML software functions. So this is the most detailed guidance we've had so far from the FDA. And all of this really dates back to this GMLP guiding principles that was published in October 2021. And then the FDA, along with UK's MHRA and Health Canada in June 24, also published some guiding principles on transparency. So we've got a guidance document on predetermined change control plan as well, and together they make up the most the official guidance that we have from the FDA so far. So let's get into transparency side of things. Transparency is one of those terms that's thrown out quite a bit in the AI space, whether it's in healthcare or just in general purpose AI settings. So it's really important to look at what is meant by transparency according to regulators that we care about in the medical device space. And here, this is coming from the Transparency Guiding Principles document published jointly by FDA, Health Canada, and UK MHRA. Basically, it's the degree to which appropriate information about your device with machine learning is clearly communicated to relevant audiences. So it's about letting others know about your machine learning medical device. This is about clear communication and the degree to which you communicate this information. So you could not communicate much at all, and you would not be transparent with your users. In terms of the audience we care about from a transparency perspective, of course, we care about patients because sometimes they're the ones using device information. If there's a mobile app, for example, that's an SAMD, we need to care about patients and how we deliver this information to patients. Healthcare providers, of course, they care about performance from a population point of view, and when the device is updated, they should know that it's been updated. Regulators, of course, care about performance of the machine learning model, and they care deeply about generalizability and how the device can apply to the entire intended patient population. And payers, of course, are a stakeholder here, and they care about the real world performance of these devices and making sure that the device continues to perform. So there are all these stakeholders, but the ones we care about today are regulators and users. So those are the two I'll be focusing on in the next couple of slides. So the goal here with transparency with the regulators is to really help the FDA in this case understand what the device does, how it works, and how a user interacts with it. And here we are specifically talking about the AI ML side of things. So there are some things that become relevant when we talk about transparency with regulators. What should we tell the FDA about? So the FDA first needs to know that the device is using AI. That's important. And what kind of ML model is being used? Is it supervised, unsupervised? Is it locked? What kind of machine learning task is it doing? Is it classification, segmentation? And this really helps the FDA understand your ML model and what it's supposed to do. Device inputs, super important because machine learning models work on data, and so having the right data to go into the model is super important. So what's the compatible inputs, model development, how it was trained, and of course, they care about device outputs, what the device actually outputs. Is it some kind of a report? Is it a risk score? Is it highlighting a specific area on an image? So they need to know that. And where does the device fit into this clinical workflow? Because you may only be doing the screening part, or in the clinical workflow, you may be doing the treatment part. So you need to clearly tell the FDA what the device does, and specifically within the device, what functions is the AI ML model doing, and how is it being used to achieve the overall intended purpose of the device. And this way, regulators can see how the AI functions are linked to the intended use of the device. And one final thing is the degree of automation. So is AI or AI functions, are they doing functions in a fully automated way, or is there a human in the loop involved and kind of overseeing AI-enabled functions? So all of those things are super important from a transparency with regulators. And then the way to provide this in a submission would be in your device description, in your software description as well, where you may define the logic of the model. And the FDA encourages that you use diagrams and wireframes and even screen capture and demo videos to really help them understand how the device works. So transparency with regulators is super important. Then with users, the goal here is for users to understand how and when to use the device, and what are its benefits and risks and limitations. I mean, these are things that we normally provide in our device labeling anyway, but specifically on the AI ML side, the model logic, the clinical workflow, where does it fit in, where should it be used within their workflow, and the limitations of device, specifically with machine learning trained on specific data sets. It could inherently have some limitations. So letting users know about, hey, this is only trained on a specific subgroup or specific kinds of devices, like and makes and models of CT scans or scanners or MRI. So those things are really important for users to know, so they can really understand when and in what situations the device can be used in. So all of this typically is provided in labeling. So we're familiar with user manuals, but also the user interface. And there's a relatively new piece of labeling, model cards. The FDA currently encourages to use model cards. These are essentially nutrition labels for AI/ML models, just kind of making sure all of the information is provided to users. Then we move on to the second part that is super important in this whole AI/ML submission, which is the reference data set. So the way the FDA defines reference data set is the best available representative truth that can be used to define the true condition for each patient case or record. So basically, this is what you will have the output of your ML model be assessed against. So super important, because the reference standard in supervised learning would be used to train your machine learning model. But in terms of checking the performance of the model, the reference standard would be used to directly compare your machine learning model with, to evaluate model performance. So it's basically the benchmark through which the FDA assesses whether or not your device performs according to this reference standard. So the goal here is to help FDA understand how well your AI/ML model performs compared to established benchmarks. So if your device is diagnosing a specific disease or grading a specific kind of tumor, how do you know that that grading or that diagnosis is conclusive or is accurate? So you would compare it against this reference standard. So from a submission point of view, the FDA cares about understanding why you selected this reference standard and why it's the best available methods. So you have to justify that in your submission. How this reference standard was generated. So was it through looking through lab reports, or was it through clinicians coming to an agreement about a certain diagnosis? So you have to justify and document this method. And how do you handle specific cases when there are results that are generated from missing reference standards? And then if you are involving humans, clinicians, to generate reference standards, then how do you make sure that bias is avoided in coming up with this? And how do you control for subjectivity? And who should be involved? If humans are involved in assessing this, coming up with reference standards, who is qualified to do that? What kind of experience and credentials do they need to have to be able to do to come up with the reference standard? And how do you achieve consensus? You may have 2 or 3 different clinicians, each with their own opinion on a certain clinical thing, and then how do you make sure that those conflicts are resolved and consensus is achieved? So it's super important that all of these details are provided in the submission, in the software description, and then in the performance testing, which would be your validation protocol and report. And this way, the FDA can know that your reference standard was established in a robust manner and it's relevant clinically, and it can be used to compare the performance of your device. The next part that all regulators care about is generalizability. They want to make sure that once the device is launched, it will work on all patient populations, not just on subgroups of populations. So generalizability is really the ability of a model to perform on data that it has not seen before. So how well does it perform on new independent data once it's out? So in terms of machine learning models, depending on model complexity, your model may or may not generalize well to the intended patient population. So if you have an underfitting model, the model is really not able to make any relationships between inputs and outputs, and it's not able to really do what it's supposed to. On the flip side, if the model is too complex, then it overfits to your training data, which means once it sees a broader data set, it's not going to be able to generalize well. And this is, of course, also not desirable. So the sweet spot here is this middle ground where there is best accuracy and best balance between underfitting and overfitting. And the goal with this is to make sure that the device performs across all patient populations. If you say all adults, then should it also perform in pregnant women, and should it also perform in different ethnicities and all of the subgroups? So it's super important to make sure that the device is generalizable, and the way to do this is um, to make sure that the device performs across all of the subgroups. So if specific kinds of ethnicities or age groups or sex, then it needs to perform consistently, even across different sites, hospitals, could be also different makes and models of acquisition equipment. So just any variables that are important clinically for your device, you need to show that your device performs equally well across all of those. And the FDA also cares about region-specific data, so making sure that that generalizability to the US intended population is demonstrated. So that's also important from an FDA perspective. And all of this is supposed to be documented in your validation report, in your final model validation report, where you show that in your performance study, all of the subgroups are performing consistently. So that's super important from a regulatory point of view. And then the final thing is, once your device is approved, of course, we know in the quality regulatory space, we are not done. But from a machine learning point of view, monitoring real world performance is really important, because these devices can degrade over time, and then it can present risks to patients. So real world monitoring is one of those pillars that the FDA wanted to focus on from very early on, when they started thinking about a regulatory framework for AI ML software as a medical device. And so over time, your device inputs may change, so and that can degrade performance of device, or your patient population may change over time, or disease patterns may change. And so all of these variables that can change over time could degrade the performance of your device. So it's super important that the real world performance of these devices are monitored. And the goal is to make sure that the device performs the same as it did before authorization as it does after authorization. So here, the FDA expects that you have plans for monitoring and detecting changes in device performance. So you have a performance monitoring plan, and you would just say, these are the variables that you care about, and these are the thresholds or metrics that you're tracking. And of course, tied to that is, when performance does degrade, what are you going to do about it? How do you deploy updates and mitigations and corrective actions to address changing performance? So that again will be documented in a performance monitoring plan. So the FDA cares about how the device is being designed, but it also cares about how you will monitor it once they clear your device. So that's also super important. And this is the last slide about just takeaways. So in terms of transparency, it really enables reviewers and users to understand the device and how it works and its performance. And having a robust reference standard is a key component that gives confidence that the software as a medical device has clinical utility against standard of care. And generalizability ensures that that the device will perform as expected in real world settings. And the final thing is post-market monitoring. It allows you to make sure that you detect performance changes over time and, of course, respond to these changes if needed. So thank you for your time, and I hope this has been helpful for you all.